We just want to take a moment to bring you a word from our amazing sponsor, The Ridge. I've been using Ridge wallets for years now, and I love them. They are sleek, stylish, but they still hold up to 12 cards, plus my cash. Many times when I take out my wallet to pay for something, someone compliments my wallet. Ridge wallets are simply better than those bulky leather wallets. Ridge wallets are perfect gifts, especially for Father's Day. They have over 30 styles and colors, so you'll be able to find something special for your father, father figure, or the father of your children. The wallets are incredibly durable, and they come with a lifetime warranty. Imagine you could buy them something that they'll carry and use every day for the rest of their life. If that isn't a thoughtful gift, I don't know what is. Right now, The Ridge has a special deal for criminally listed viewers. By going to ridge.com/listed, you can save 10% and get free worldwide shipping and returns. Help your dad ditch the bulky wallet for Father's Day and help him get a wallet for the 21st century by going to ridge.com/listed. Number 3. Kenny Fox. Kenny Fox was born in February 1973 and he grew up in Lexington, Tennessee. He was described as a mischievous child, and in school he was known as the class clown. In high school, he played football. Kenny married his high school sweetheart, Deanna Renee Moore, when they were just 18 years old. They went on to have 3 sons, Michael, Dylan, and Ethan. Kenny was a proud father, and he loved watching his sons play football. In the spring of 2012, Kenny was 39 years old. He was the fire chief for the volunteer firefighters in Decatur County, Tennessee. He was also a sheriff's deputy. In his spare time, he volunteered with underprivileged youths. Kenny's eldest son, Michael, was 19, and he was also a volunteer firefighter in the county. His son Dylan was 14, and his youngest, Ethan, was 22 months old. Early on the morning of April 12, 2012, a fire broke out at the Oak Hill Cafe Bar and Grill in Decatur County. Kenny and his son Michael were 2 of the firefighters that responded. 2 other firefighters were a pair of brothers, Randy and Jeremy Inman. While Kenny, Randy, and Jeremy were in the building, the roof started to collapse and it was going to land on Randy and Jeremy. Kenny Fox pushed them out of the way. Randy and Jeremy were both injured, but they survived. Michael Fox went into the building and tried to save his father, but sadly, he couldn't. Instead, Michael waited until his father's body was retrieved from the wreckage. Kenny was hailed as a hero because his last humanly act saved Randy and Jeremy Inman's lives. Over 1,000 people turned out for Kenny's funeral. It was later determined that the fire that killed the father of 3 was an act of arson. So Kenny's death is considered first-degree murder. Unfortunately, over 9 years later, the investigators still have no idea who started the fire. They are hoping that a tip will lead to an arrest, so they are offering a $25,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest. Sadly, unless someone comes forward, the case may never be solved. Number 2. Chloie Leverette and Christopher Gage Daniel. As autumn was starting in 2012, 9-year-old Chloie Leverette and her 7-year-old half-brother, Christopher Daniel, went by the name Gage, were living with their maternal grandmother, 70-year-old Molly McLaren, and her husband, 72-year-old Leon Bubba McLaren. They lived in a 1-story ranch-style 4-bedroom house in Unionville, Tennessee. On September 23, 2012, at about 6:30 p.m., a neighbor saw Chloie and Gage playing in the yard. About 3 hours later, a neighbor saw that the McLaren home was on fire. The house was full of items, so the fire was intense and it burned into the early morning hours. It appeared that no one had made it out of the house safely. After the fire was put out, several agencies searched the debris. The remains of Bubba and Molly were found in the basement. It appeared that they were in their beds when the fire started, and then the floor collapsed and they fell into the basement. But no trace of Chloe or Gage's bodies were found in the debris. The obvious answer is that they died in the fire and their bodies were incinerated. But experts say it is nearly impossible for a body to be completely turned to ash in a house fire. Even with cremations, bodies aren't completely destroyed. At the very least, there are usually bone shards left. It is incredibly tough to destroy teeth. Also, while the fire was intense, they did find the remains of Bubba and Molly. They also found the remains of a pet poodle and a pet cockatoo. They even found remnants of food. So at the very least, they would have found a bone shard or a tooth from one of the siblings. But several experts who examined the site found absolutely no evidence that Chloe or Gage were in the house when it caught fire. The hope was that the children got out of the house before the fire became too intense and they were somewhere safe nearby. The authorities used helicopters, infrared cameras, and dogs to search the debris in the area around the site. They did not find any trace of the two children. The police asked Chloe and Gage's mother, Cheryl, if she knew anything about the whereabouts of her children. She said that she didn't, so they asked her to take a polygraph exam. A polygraph exam was needed to issue an Amber Alert. Cheryl agreed and she took the polygraph exam. The polygraph examiner determined that she was telling the truth. So on September 28th, 5 days after the fire, an Amber Alert was initiated. A team from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, known as the ATF, helped with the investigation to see if they could determine what started the fire. It turned out that in the basement of the home, there were about 30 propane tanks. Some of the tanks had been down there for decades. The ATF could neither determine nor rule out if the propane tanks started the fire. The ATF ultimately couldn't say what caused the fire or if it was arson or an accident. They consider the case open. Chloe and Gage's family know that Bubba and Molly would not have let anyone take the children without them putting up a fight. So they believe that Bubba and Molly were murdered and then the killer took the children out of the house and torched the house to cover their tracks. Besides Chloe and Gage, something else was missing from the house. It was a safe that contained Bubba and Molly's will. The will had been changed a month or two before the fire. The will had been changed so that Chloe and Gage were the sole inheritors. Since the new will had gone missing, the old will was used to settle the estate. Cheryl Daniel believes that someone close to the family killed her mother and stepfather and kidnapped her children. There have been several sightings of Chloe and Gage around the United States and even in Costa Rica, but none of them have been verified. According to the Unsolved Mysteries podcast, there was one possible sighting of Chloe that was very promising. A few months after the fire, a woman was in a restaurant in a small town in Tennessee, and she thought she saw a child that looked like Chloe. She was so convinced that the child was Chloe, she took several photos of the girl and sent them to the investigators. The investigators thought it could have been Chloe, so they showed Cheryl the photographs in February 2013. She was sure it was her daughter. The police went to the restaurant, but by the time they got there, it was impossible to track down the girl and the people she was with. They were apparently just passing through town, and they had paid for their meal in cash. Unfortunately, the restaurant didn't have any cameras. Cheryl Daniel believes that Chloe and Gage are still alive. Before they went missing, she had been battling a drug addiction. In the years since the fire, she has gone clean because she wants to be the best mother she can when they come home. In September 2020, age-progressed images of Chloe and Gage were released. Chloe and Gage's birthdays are within a week of each other in June. If they are still alive at the time of this video, Chloe would be nearly 18 years old and Gage would almost be 16. Number 1. The Walkers and the Schoensteins. The Walker family lived in a large ranch-style home in Clayton, California. It was a blended family. Richard Walker had one daughter from a previous relationship, 20-year-old Linda Walker, while Carol Walker had 3 children from her previous marriage, 13-year-old Cynthia Schoenstein, 9-year-old Carlton Schoenstein, and 6-year-old Caroline Schoenstein. Then, Richard and Carol had 2 children together, 4-year-old Theodore Walker and Marianne Walker, who was 6 months old. Richard was a prominent contractor and Carol was a homemaker. All 6 of their children lived in the same house in Clayton. On the night of September 7th, 1968, Richard and Carol were attending a fundraiser for a local hospital. Their 6 children were all at home. Sometime after 1 a.m., a 20-year-old neighbor named Dale Ross saw that their house was on fire. 9-year-old Carlton and 6-year-old Caroline were banging on a window. Ross ran over and smashed the window. He managed to get Carlton and Caroline out through the window. Then Carlton yelled, "I gotta go back after the baby." He then ran back into the burning house. Ross tried to follow him in, but the fire was too intense, so he couldn't. Sadly, Carlton never made it back out. While this was going on, another neighbor called the fire department, and they arrived a short time later. Carol and Richard returned home to see 60-foot flames coming out of their house, and the firefighters were struggling to put the fire out. Richard and Carol also learned that 5 of their 6 children were still in the house. When the police searched the debris, they found the 5 bodies of Helen and Richard's children. 9-year-old Carlton's body was beside the crib, and his 6-month-old half-sister, Marianne, was in his arms. It was determined that all 5 victims died with smoke inhalation, and some of them had been burned. By all accounts, it was an awful tragedy, but was it an accident or arson? A few weeks after the fire, it was announced that the fire had been deliberately set. Before the fire was started, an accelerant had been poured on the living room carpet. Then someone threw an explosive through the living room window and it landed on the couch. It exploded and started the deadly blaze. But why would anyone want to kill the 5 family members? No one in the family was involved in illegal activity and they didn't have any enemies. The police simply couldn't find anyone who would have wanted to hurt them. It wasn't long before the case went cold. Years later, a suspect would emerge, a multiple murderer named John Sapp. In the spring of 1986, 33-year-old John Sapp was arrested in Grass Valley, California for being a convicted felon in the possession of a concealable firearm. John was a felon because in January 1981, he was arrested for burning down his ex-girlfriend's house in Richmond, California in December 1980. Nearly a month after her house burned down, on January 24th, John's 24-year-old ex-girlfriend, Elizabeth Duarte, vanished. John had been a suspect in Duarte's disappearance, but the police didn't have any evidence to connect him to her disappearance. Instead, in April 1981, he pleaded no contest to arson charges. He ended up serving 2 years in prison. The day after John was arrested in 1986 for carrying a concealed weapon, he started confessing to murders he had committed. He said that the first murder happened just over 10 years earlier, on December 22, 1975, when he was 26 years old. He was living in Concord, California. He was friends with a 22-year-old man named John Abano. John said that Abano was a marijuana dealer and a heroin addict. John said that Abano was making him angry because he was always making bad drug deals, so he killed him. John said he took Abano out to the Lime Ridge open space, which is a nature area with trails in Concord. He led him to a remote area and then shot him several times in the head. He initially covered his body with some brush, but then he returned a few days later and buried him. John then told the detective that the next time he killed someone was 5 years later. It was his ex-girlfriend, 24-year-old Elizabeth Duarte. They had dated for several years, but broke up a few months before she went missing. John said that they had a love-hate relationship, but then the balance stopped working. He had also heard she had hired a hitman to shoot up his house. John said that he finally decided to murder her when someone offered him $10,000 to kill her because she was a snitch. After John and Duarte broke up, she started dating another man. John said that he paid her boyfriend to lure her over to his house. John claimed that when Duarte came in, he struck her on the head. He said the strike was so powerful, it caused a cut that exposed her skull. He said that he put a bandage around her head and gave her a blanket. He then drove her out to Lime Ridge, not far from where he killed John Abano. He claimed that she was not only alive, but conscious, and they talked all night. He then shot Duarte in the stomach. He claimed that Duarte told him to shoot her again. So he unloaded his gun into her. He then wrapped her body in a blanket and buried her. John Sapp then admitted to a third murder, which happened in mid-August 1985. He had shot to death a 35-year-old low-level cocaine dealer named Robert Weber. Weber had lived in Concord, California. He owed several drug dealers, including John Sapp, money. On August 13, 1985, Weber told his girlfriend that he and John were going out of town to buy drugs from someone. Weber took several guns and $17,000 with him. That night, Weber called his girlfriend and told her that the seller never showed up. That was the last time she heard from him. A few days later, on August 18th, Robert Weber's body was found by hunters on Walker Ridge in Colusa County, California. He had been shot multiple times. It turned out that these murders and disappearances weren't the only ones that John was connected to. On June 5th, 1985, John's 63-year-old mother, Geraldine Sapp, went missing. At the time, John was living with his mother in Oroville, California. Between October 1984 and March 1985, Geraldine had drained her bank account of more than $60,000. She told people it was for a business venture with her son, John. Geraldine told another one of her sons and one of her daughters that John was using the money for an antiques deal. John told the police that he did not kill his mother. Instead, he claimed that he learned that a man in the drug business had killed his mother because she started to become nosy about the man's business. John said that he kidnapped the man and took him out into San Francisco Bay on a boat. He got a confession from the man and found out where his mother was buried. He then shot the man and dumped his body in the bay. John then directed the police as to where they could find the bodies of John DeBono, Elizabeth Duarte, and his mother, Geraldine Sapp. Duarte's body was found buried with a blanket wrapped around it. There was a bandage wrapped around her head. She had been shot multiple times. Geraldine Sapp's body was found as well. It appeared that she had died from a blow to the head. The remains of John DeBono were never found. John Sapp was ultimately charged with the murders of John DeBono, Elizabeth Duarte, and Robert Weber. He was not charged with the murder of his mother because the district attorney did not think that there was enough evidence to convict him. John Sapp went to trial for the 3 murders in 1991, 5 years after he confessed. The jury deliberated for 15 hours. On June 21, 1991, he was found guilty of all 3 murders. A few months later, in October 1991, he was sentenced to death. He was sent to live out the rest of his life on death row in San Quentin prison. So why is John Sapp a suspect in the fire that killed the Walkers and the Schoensteins? At the time of the deadly fire, John was 15 years old, and he lived within walking distance of the crime scene. He had just been released from juvenile hall. The judge who sentenced him to juvenile hall lived a few doors down from the Walkers and the Schoensteins. Investigators believe that John intended to burn the judge's house down, but he got the wrong house and set the Walkers' family home on fire. John Sapp has been questioned several times regarding the deadly blaze. He has always denied that he was the arsonist. At the time of this video, 68-year-old John Sapp is sitting on death row in San Quentin prison in San Quentin, California. If he did kill the Walkers and the Schoensteins, then his presumed body count is 9. But the police think it's possible that he may have killed even more people. Unfortunately, we may never know exactly how many lives John Sapp claimed. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please check out the latest episode of our podcast, Into the Killing. In this episode, we look at the case of the kid on the milk carton, Eitan Pates. You can find Into the Killing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.